Okay. It's the Debbie Goldsberry. Once again for Baseline for Change. Debbie, thank you,
Hello.
as always, for doing this.
Of course.
So we have recapped the 90s in activism with you. We've recapped the ensuing decade, or the decade before this one, with you. And then now, I guess, since we're making our way to the back half of 2019, we can go ahead and recap the 2010s in activism, in cannabis activism.
Those were the 2010s. I can't remember any of it. I think we gotta, can we pick a different year? I don't know.
Well,
Look, 2010 was rough. We were preparing for legalization of adult use all the way from 2010. We have been preparing for federal legalization since then. 2010, that's the year we finally thought we might pull this off. That's what happened. We finally believed that we could pull it off. The tide turned, the toothpaste was out of the tube, it was not going back in the tube. That's what happened in 2010. Okay. So for me, I spent the first half of 2010 doing small business consulting, because this is what I recognize myself. We're at a very crucial time in the history of prohibition, where it's become safe enough for people from outside industries to come into the industry. And so they have more skills, more business skills, they have more money. Often they know how to get permits, they know compliance. They often come from highly regulatory industries, highly regulated industries. And 2010 started the process of cannabis being safer for business people. And so the small business people, the pot growers and the pot dealers, started getting knocked out of the game in 2010. That's what happened. Everything started to change. So for me, what I knew is if I could apply my talents to helping our own people, cannabis growers, cannabis manufacturers, people who are already in retail, small pot dealers that were dealing to their friends but wanted to go legal, maybe when we got to where we are now, we could capture the ethos and the mission that we've all been on, which we've talked about. Hemp can save the planet. We're trying to make a nicer, kinder planet that'll last, that we can hand off to our kids in the future, and it won't be destroyed. So the whole first part of this decade, for me, has been about how to empower our own people to take control and not to give up control like in any industry. There's the vanguard. They do it first. They think of it first. They do it. They're fearless. Then it becomes safer. More people move in. That was the early 2000s. And then everybody and their uncle comes in, and that's where we're at right now.
All right. So I guess, with my first phone calls happening in December 2012, because I'm from New York, I'm from the East Coast. So who knew what was going on, right? Not me. But then they did the vote there in Colorado and Washington. So in December 2012, I started to just call people and say, what's going on? What is this?
Right.
So I have been around now for most of this decade, and the change has been remarkable. I don't think of myself as an activist. I think of myself as more of an anthropologist. And so, as an anthropologist, I find everything fascinating, right? I have the ability to almost be able to divorce myself enough to just be able to see what's happening. As an activist, though, coming out of the 90s, you had a win in 96, right? Coming out of the 2000s, you had dispensaries up and running and truly part of the community. Coming out of this decade, yes, okay, fine, everyone and their brother, and we kind of have to get back to the roots. But what do you see as the win here? We did legalize cannabis overtly, not holistically, but it's kind of sort of legal, and do we count it as a win?
Heck yeah, we count it as a win. We legalized it. People are getting out of jail.
Okay.
Some of the marijuana lifers have gotten free. We see that different counties and even states are now going to wipe their records clean, the expungement of records. That's wonderful. I'll tell you what else. The quality of the cannabis has dramatically improved, just dramatically. Night and day, it's so much better. So those are all wins. Those are big wins. We saw big business rushing in. We saw people with different set of ethics and values rushing in. We've seen, and these are obviously the problems, we've seen that people of color find it nearly impossible to break into the cannabis industry. Even though they might have been selling cannabis themselves for 20, 30 years, it's impossible to get into the regulated industry if you don't have a lot of money, millions of dollars in free-flowing money, enough runway to last 3 years. Who's got that? Only wealthy people from outside of the industry, because all of us have been afraid to accumulate money all this time because it's been a risk. We couldn't accumulate our assets. We brought in cannabis sales, money from cannabis sales, and we spent it in our communities as fast as it came in. So we were never able to land on any wealth or any assets. So we're at a disadvantage, people who've been in the industry a long time. This is what's going to happen in the next decade. We're going to fix that. It's not fair. Government sees it. It's the talk of the town. The cannabis industry is not equitable. The cannabis industry is unfair. The cannabis industry is not open to people joining who have been longstanding participants or who were really targeted by the war on drugs. So I think the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see more regulations regarding the cannabis industry, equity, and permitting, and we're going to see more governments wrestling with the idea, how do we balance out this factor? How do we make sure that the permits are for cannabis businesses, which can be worth millions of dollars, are given out in a way that's equitable?
Yeah, and Massachusetts is really focused on equity. They're figuring it out. Illinois, becomes a legal state with equity as a kind of leading indicator there. Some call it the best equity package that is part of legalization. New York failed to legalize, but then the next day passed an expungement bill. So, I mean, if nothing else, expungement, check the box, right?
Great. Yeah. A lot of people are being helped by this.
Yeah. Also, cracking that, the science open, as you mentioned here, we are having much different conversations about this plant at the end of the decade than we were at the beginning of the decade. We're truly finding out now about what's in there, over 100 cannabinoids. Some say pushing 200 cannabinoids, and we're actually going to research those cannabinoids.
Right, I'm ready.
Yeah. So we do have some wins, but what I love about the conversations with you is that I find that it's truth that the work just never ends as far as activism with cannabis. Just have different goals.
It's true. And if people like me do our job right over the next couple years, big business, when they come in, they'll have to use the same vocabulary, and they'll have to be mission-based, and they'll have to be working for equity, and they'll have to be working to solve the harms of the war on drugs. That's part of it. So it's a time and place that's a little weird, but we're going to get through it.
I've requoted you back to you a few times, but I love your quote, which is, listen, the product is cannabis. And so everybody's going to have to catch up to the product. The product's going to change them before they're going to change the product.
Smoke weed with a millionaire, billionaire, every chance you get, I guess, at this point. If you see a guy in a suit, offer him a joint.
That is a perfect way to end your recap of the 2010s. I love doing these. Thank you so much as always, Debbie.
Hey, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. All right. I'll see you next time.